Good afternoon, and welcome to the long-awaited second episode of Picture of Health with Dr. Susan J. Littman. Today, we're delving into some pivotal themes that are reshaping the landscape of healthcare. In this episode, we'll explore how COVID-19 has fundamentally altered our understanding of healthcare and its future directions, but we're also going to highlight some groundbreaking innovations and new practices that have emerged in response to the pandemic, and so much more. And we have the woman of the hour right here on the line with us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce once again Dr. Susan Littman. Hello, Dr. Littman. How are you today?
Hi. Nice to talk to you again, Scott. I'm doing well.
Excellent. That's so great to hear. And it's wonderful to be here speaking with you again. Also, I've been looking forward to it, and I couldn't be more excited. Now, I want to get things rolling with a pandemic-related question, since that was a great focal point of the last show, and we're kind of picking up where we left off with that theme. How has COVID-19 fundamentally shifted our perception of healthcare, and what does this mean for the future?
That's a great question. I think the main way that the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted our thinking about healthcare relates to the speed that new technologies, knowledge of COVID-19 developed so quickly in the face of the pandemic and worldwide distribution of the virus in a very rapid way that forced us to quickly develop technologies and ways to diagnose the disease quickly. We had never before had home testing that had been used to the extent that it was in the diagnosis of COVID-19 infection. And also, as you know, the knowledge of the virus, the sequencing, identification of it as being a coronavirus, followed by treatments and vaccines developed so quickly in the face of the stress of caring for the new disease. So I think that was a major change that we had previously kind of only thought could happen in the setting of a movie or something to that effect.
Yeah, we had plenty of movies about that, but it hadn't happened in our lifetime.
Exactly, yeah. And another way that this disease is slightly different is that it was a massive focus on prevention. As you remember, things shut down, we were social distancing. A lot of the other diseases that we normally think of in healthcare just developed internally within our bodies. There was nothing that we could do to prevent acquisition of the disease process. But with infectious diseases, that's a significant component of care and prevention. And that is really very different because it also came into the general public space of all of those changes that were necessary to get the pandemic under control, so to speak.
Can you highlight some standout examples of groundbreaking healthcare innovations that have arisen due to the pandemic?
In some ways, we developed new ideas as a result of somewhat being thrown into a serious healthcare issue that was worldwide in its manifestation. So I don't think that by and large, prior to that, there was any healthcare issue that sort of was affecting almost all countries in the world and almost all areas of the United States. That offers certainly significant challenges, but also there was, I think in a positive way, significant exchange of ideas that helped these innovations to develop so quickly. For example, we had some use of molecular techniques with precision medicine that had developed a knowledge of how to use genetic sequencing of, for example, tumors in order to be able to provide specific or unique healthcare related to that individual.
Yeah.
But those techniques of sequencing and rapidly being able to make a diagnosis of what type of virus, this was utilized in order to be able to quickly react to the pandemic. If you remember, the only other example we had of somewhat worldwide, but certainly a much slower process in terms of our knowledge might be HIV.
Yeah.
But the difference is that affected certain populations and did not affect every, it was not applicable to potentially every single individual in the world.
Right, it was different in that way.
Yeah, it was different. It was very different. But I do think that people that were specifically on the front lines were utilizing knowledge that had developed in other contexts to be able to react and increase our knowledge and application so rapidly. That's the main innovation, if you want to say, that came out of the pandemic. But a number of other things were sequelae of that. For example, we are much more open to telehealth, not necessarily seeing a patient in the office, but rather like using technology to aid in our medical care.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of other things that have developed secondary to the fact that we weren't always able to see the patients in the office. For example, big push to use digital health, wearables, using technology, and perhaps AI we're in the early stages of that, and certainly that has a potential for, I don't want to say harm, but
it's a risk.
Misuse.
There can be a downside.
But it also could be used in a positive way for healthcare innovation and care of people. So I think there's a lot of things to come too. If you remember, we went from not knowing anything to sequencing, developing vaccines, developing the ability to quickly make a diagnosis, developing vaccines, and then in parallel with the vaccines was the ability to develop therapeutics. In a rapid way that brought us to the point that we are today, that it's not so stressful on the healthcare system, but rather we have significant knowledge about how to manage the various manifestations of this disease. And so I would say we're back into a more familiar learning curve with how to care for this disease and ability perhaps to do clinical trials with testing of certain therapeutics. So I do think that worldwide and with rapid medical advancement, we got to the point that it's not so stressful on the healthcare system like it was initially.
Do you see many COVID cases anymore?
We don't see it to the same extent that we did in the 2020, 2021, but certainly COVID is still circulating in the population and people acquire it and patients get sick and need either hospitalization or care in the home. Another advantage, as you know, is that we have medications that we can give, that we are not simply following out the natural history of the disease, but rather intervening to prevent systemic infections. But not everybody is vaccinated. The virus is circulating. We see it and need to care for people with COVID-19.
Fascinating. Now, what role can the United States play in driving global healthcare innovation and setting new standards for healthcare excellence?
The United States is in a somewhat unique position due to its size, having a large research network, multiple universities and healthcare centers of excellence, as well as companies focused specifically on healthcare related to drug development, as well as a vast ability to have funding sources to do research, with government agencies like the NIH, as well as private sources of money. So I think that all of those things allow the robust research and development focus in the United States. But of course, that doesn't mean to say that there aren't healthcare innovations and what I just said on a smaller scale throughout the world in different countries. It's just that I think it's the size of the United States, but globally, the United States can drive healthcare innovation as a single entity. But really, there's excellent research and innovation in many countries around the world.
Wow, that's exciting to think about. There's so much happening. It's amazing.
I know.
I'm wondering, how can healthcare professionals, including doctors, of course, collaborate with policymakers to enact positive changes in the U.S. healthcare system? In your opinion, is this necessary?
In my opinion, I think this is going to be an even more necessary component of healthcare in the future, because unfortunately, maybe because of some of these technologies that we were just talking about, and the fact that people can talk about topics without knowledge and influence people about healthcare pandemics in a negative way, I think that I'm hoping that there is more and more collaboration between healthcare professionals, scientists, doctors, researchers in industry with policymakers for the transfer of accurate knowledge to the public. Because I think by and large, well, not 100%, policymakers, people in our government don't really have a strong background in science or medicine. And it's important for those people to have respect for a somewhat different way of thinking that you have when you come through thinking of scientific things. Because in medicine, we don't actually make decisions or thoughts before we have knowledge through observation and studying of a disease. And the scientific method, or the way we do clinical research, involves identifying what the problem is, oftentimes doing clinical trial. It's a much slower way of acquiring knowledge than someone who can develop an opinion all on their own. And I don't know where the problem necessarily is at this juncture, but I do think that perhaps we need to start having strong focus on science, a stronger focus on science as part of our educational program as we're coming through elementary school, middle school, and high school, so we can then appreciate the healthcare system in order to be able to then interact with people in healthcare in a way that these people that are making policy can have accurate information about medicine. Because right now we have some issues and people with opinions not necessarily driven by accurate knowledge of the problems.
What do you think causes that?
It's an interesting question, because I don't think that there was, say if you take 20, 25 years ago, I don't think that there was so much skepticism of information. Like, people respected that there were experts in medicine, science, vaccine development, therapeutics, and those people had a knowledge base that people without that background could intersect with and learn and respect the information that came through. This is actually a really significant problem right now, and I don't know how we address it in a way that is beneficial and respectful.